Now we're going to make this much more interesting by using data, okay? So what we'll do is we'll go back to our test. Let's repeat what we've done here, right? As you can see here in the test, it's basically says add new to do, feed the cat, clean the floor, right? And then it just basically validates the same thing in here. If I would go in here and look at the validation, it's basically just looking at the exact same element. It's not so interesting, this kind of testing we've done, because every time we run it, we will just basically add 2 items, feed the cat, clean the floor. So what this test isn't really add items to list. It's add, feed the cat, and clean the floor. That could be useful, but wouldn't it be better if we said add items to list, generic, right? And then you could feed this test case with different types of data that would add different items, check it, and then basically you could what we call have a reusable test, right? It would be a much more versatile test, and that's what we're gonna do now. And usually this requires kind of manipulating variables and data and sending it into functions, but with Boosang we made this really simple, how you can kind of isolate the data and then bind it into forms. So I'm gonna show you how that works. I'm just gonna go ahead and create a new test here, and I'm gonna say, let's call it add items to list, and we'll call it from CSV. So we are going to use some CSV data that we're going to add directly into the list. And of course, it's unnecessary in this case to use a CSV. We should be using a vector, perhaps an array. I just want to illustrate this functionality right here. So what I'll do is I'll say new CSV and I'll say items. And then here I'll put, this is the item name. So I'll just put name. And then I'll just hit enter and I put feed the dog. And then what do you think we need to do? I need to record this video, okay? So record the lab video, okay? That's what I need to do. So I'm basically just putting stuff in data here. As you can see, there is a lot of different data structures here that we support, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Let's get started with the test instead. And what I'll do here is I basically want to loop over these items. What I'm doing is I'm adding this as loop data. And then I'll go back to my application. I make sure that we're back in the regular state, and I'll get started here on recording some cool stuff. Okay, so what I do now, the difference is this time I want to bind data. So I'll hit that little thing and I'll hit record. Okay, and now when I start typing here, it's actually going to suggest to me the first item that you were seeing there before. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit feed the dog and I'm going to hit enter, right? And now I'm going to also create a validation. We need to close this little thing, okay? I'm also going to create a validation of feed the dog here. Just going to show you what this does, right? So now I've recorded already something that takes something from a data list, puts it into here, and also has a validation. And if I go into the validation, if I look at the data content, right, you see that it has automatically loop name there. So what the Boosang tool does is that it notices, oh, this matches the data. So it automatically substitutes the validation condition with the data. So now we've created a data loop. So I'm just going to run this and you'll see how powerful this is. So now I can just run this and you can see that it automatically is going to, perhaps we'll get an error here that would be interesting for us to see. Okay, that's good because now I forgot to set the entry URL. So you see, it kicked off our repair function here. So what we're going to do is stop and go back to that test case, okay? I forgot here to put what wasn't in the other test there, to-do list. So I'll go back, I'll set the URL to be to-do list, and then I'll save the test, and I'll run it again to see if it works better. Now you see it much better. And as you can see now, it's going to start a loop, and it's going to add, feed the dog, it creates the validation on top of it, and also add the lab video to-do list. So now we've already created a very versatile test case that adds things to this list, also creates the validation, and of course, in my test data, I can now, of course, replace them to whatever, right? I can say whatever and do something else. Now I can run the test again with these new parameters, right? Whatever, do something else. So you see how simple that is. So already we've done something that would require, usually a couple of days of programming to be able to automatically loop over a document, insert what's needed, and create a good dynamic validation on the result.